I rise today to speak about the state of our climate, hoping that during the State of the Nation, it would have been addressed. Unfortunately, I don't think the issue of environment and climate change was sufficiently addressed, and therefore, here is a state of our climate. Never before in history have humans proactively worked together to avert a global catastrophe, as what we now attempt to achieve with the challenge of climate change. It is 2010, a particular time to look into the progress of countries towards halving poverty and achieving the Millennium Development Goals, or the MDGs. Eradicating extreme poverty and hunger is impossible to achieve without taking extensive measures to minimize the impacts of recurring floods, droughts, and other hazards that push Filipinos back into poverty. It is time to recognize that disasters turbocharged by a changing climate have undone years of development gains, and that unsound and short-sighted development practices themselves are playing a significant role in worsening disaster risk. We are at present in a darker place than we could have ever imagined. We are polluting at a rate more rapid than what the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change had declared as the worst-case scenario. The climate crisis knows no territorial boundaries, but it is the Asia-Pacific region which bears much of the burden of the global disaster risk problem, expressed in the historical frequency, severity, and the impact of disaster events. The imperative today is to understand new risks and their impact on vulnerable populations. At home, disaster risks abound. The Philippines, being an archipelagic state located in the western edge of the Pacific Ocean and directly within the Ring of Fire, faces the constant risk of typhoons, drought, as well as earthquakes and volcanic eruptions. With climate change, we are to expect weather in extremes. As one of the countries most affected by sea level rise, the Philippines is inundated 9 to 12 millimeters per year, which is much higher than the global annual average of 3 millimeters. A 1 meter rise in sea level would inundate an estimated 129,000 hectares of land, affecting 2 million people. Manila invariably registers the highest rise in sea level, and this impact will be grave for the country's administrative and financial capital. There is no need, or there is a need, to improve our scientific and technical capacity to forecast the shifting hazards and their links to disasters. Downscaling, which requires time, skill, and the human and computational resources, is now possible to help our municipalities prepare for the possible impacts of their alternative climate futures. Current modeling runs show Mindanao and the southern part of the Visayas as warmer and drier in 2020 and 2050 compared to Luzon, but western Mindanao, particularly the central and southern peninsula, are projected to have the highest increase in temperature. It is also projected that, except for western Luzon, there will be less rains over Luzon and Mindanao and more rains in the Visayas. Aside from the change in the pathway of storms, research at the Pag-asa and the Manila Observatory reveal that there have been fewer but more intense rainy days. As the number of rainy days decrease, water-dependent sectors will need to anticipate and innovate approaches to achieving and maintaining sustainable supplies of fresh water while preparing for floods and landslides. Rainfall variability analysis has also shown us that there has been a geographic redistribution of rain all over the country. This highlights the two extremes that the country is currently experiencing: drought and deluge. Experts agree that the looming water crisis is the result of the combination of rapid population growth, pollution, the destruction and mismanagement of freshwater resources, and the failure to study and anticipate climate variability. All these factors create a growing water security challenge. Even as we speak, 1 out of 5 Filipinos has no direct access to clean water, based on World Bank estimates. This uneven distribution of water is echoed throughout the farms in the countryside. The lack of storage infrastructure also leaves the Philippines highly sensitive to droughts and floods. Water is also vital to energy development, directly to fuel hydropower generation and indirectly to cool generation facilities of both fossil fuel and renewable energy producing plants. Without water to cool systems, facilities tend to break down from overheating. One need only recall the blackouts we had over the summer to realize the value of this resource. The agriculture sector, which accounted for 81% of total water consumption in 2007, is most affected in the event of a water shortage during prolonged dry spells. And to address this, I filed a resolution pushing for better adaptation in the water sector, which entails comprehensive watershed management, irrigation efficiency, the introduction of low water use crops, recycling of water, the creation of water impoundment and rainwater harvesting systems, and the improvement of monitoring and forecasting systems for floods and droughts. The capital is not spared from the dangers of a prolonged drought. Just last month, the water level in Angat has plunged. Long queues for water have become a common sight in many affected barangays. A disturbing study from Pag-asa reveals that water entry in the Angat Dam has decreased by 500 million cubic meters for the last 50 years. This strongly supports a resolve to think of a long-term development intervention. At the root of this water shortage is a deterioration of the country's forest areas. Under nature's order of things, watershed areas store water for release into the water receptacles during the dry months, ensuring a continuity of water supply. Yet most of the proclaimed watershed areas have been classified as deteriorating or dying. We lose 1.4% of our forest cover per year. I've also filed a resolution urging the Department of Public Works and Highways to implement a 21-year-old law, Republic Act number 6716, or the Rainwater and Spring Development Act of 1989. Why has the DPWH not fully implemented this law? Why has it not constructed wells and rainwater collectors, developed springs, and rehabilitated existing water wells in all barangays during the last 21 years? Our experiences with Ondoy, Pepeng, and Bashang expose the country's lack of an effective weather forecasting and early warning communication systems. They are either underutilized, outdated, and inadequate to effectively predict typhoons, determine their intensity, and communicate warnings to everyone exposed to these hazards. The critical gaps in operational, scientific, and institutional capacity can only lead to increasing the vulnerability of the poorest sectors, those living in high-risk areas and whose livelihoods are at the mercy of extreme weather events. The Senate Committee on Climate Change conducted a series of public hearings last year after the onslaught of Ondoy and Pepeng. A matter of discussion in these hearings was dam operations, as waters were released based on outdated protocols, flooding several provinces in Luzon. We now call upon the DOE and the NAPOCOR to review their planning and operations in light of the science available and to ensure that extreme weather events are taken into consideration in the process. Our hydropower systems must be climate resilient, which entails measures for improved management of our dams linked to reliable weather forecasts, and effective early warning systems for communities at risk of floods due to dam water releases. I've already filed Senate Bill number 1406, or the Pag-asa Modernization Act of 2010, which will give the agency 5 billion pesos for the acquisition of modern equipment and communication systems, providing for the necessary information requirements. With regard to our problem on flooding, I've also filed a resolution urging the Metro Manila Development Authority and the Department of Public Works and Highways to implement a river rehabilitation program in order to recover the length of our rivers and promote better water flow along our major tributaries to prevent flooding.